The one thing passengers always seem to remember is the landing. Practicing soft field landings will not only get you greater utilization out of your aircraft, but will perfect the skills and techniques necessary to make any landing great. The objective of performing soft field landings is to develop the pilot's ability to obtain maximum performance from the airplane while performing soft field landings. In defining maximum performance, the Airplane Flying Handbook states a number of things. Touch down at slowest possible speed, keep the nose wheel off the surface, and then control the rate at which you transfer weight from wings to the wheels. The idea of the soft field, or unimproved runway, may recall many images to mind. The nostalgia of aviation pioneers flying their canvas-covered biplanes to the skies, the bush pilot landing on a gravel creek bed, or a small training aircraft alighting on a short grass strip. When referencing soft fields, the Airplane Flying Handbook suggests using the soft field technique on fields that are rough or have soft surfaces, such as snow, sand, mud, or tall grass. I would advise against picking a landing strip of mud. However, this does illustrate that this soft field technique is important when making a forced off-airport landing. Before starting, be sure to review the standard traffic pattern and the stabilized approach. Remember, a stabilized approach consists of having all checklists complete, flight path correct, landing configuration correct, proper airspeed, power setting appropriate for aircraft configuration, and sink rate not abnormal. The Airplane Flying Handbook suggests landing as slow as possible to avoid putting stress on the landing gear when landing on a rough surface. To accomplish this, a stabilized approach with an emphasis on proper energy management, altitude and airspeed, must be maintained. If the pilot lands as slow as possible, the aircraft will be in the proper nose-high, mains first attitude and place the strong main gear in position to take the punishment of landing while protecting the nose gear. If a crosswind component is added to the equation, maintaining proper correction throughout the landing from final approach to taxi back will be crucial. Touching down with the upwind main gear first will also be necessary. This is not just recommended, but will improve your control and technique during the landing flare. Before hitting the pattern, FAR 91-103 requires certain actions be taken by the pilot in command. Summarizing this paragraph, each pilot in command must become familiar with all available information concerning the flight and must include, for any flight, runway lengths at airports of intended use, and the takeoff and landing distance information derived from the data provided in the appropriate airplane flight manual. Great landings are often the result of a well-planned and executed pattern. As with a normal landing, the pilot initiates the before landing checklist before midfield downwind. Fuel pump on, carburetor heat is necessary, and mixture rich. Airspeed control and ultimately energy management is crucial from this point on. The pilot uses standard speeds and configurations throughout the pattern until short final. This means on downwind, after the abeam point, fly 90 knots indicated and extend 10 degrees of flaps. Turning base approximately a half mile from the abeam point, slow to 80 knots and increase flaps to 25 degrees. On final, set flaps to 40 degrees and slow to 70 knots. Utilize the aim point to determine control inputs on final. This is also a good point for the pilot to perform the final configuration check and complete the before landing checklist. Next, the pilot will choose an aim point. This can be a dark patch of grass or a reference line between two runway markers. Because the pilot will dissipate energy in the flare, a touchdown at some point beyond the aim point is expected. The pilot determines the stabilized descent to the runway is maintained by keeping this point stationary in the windscreen. If the point appears to drop, the pilot will land long. If it rises in the windscreen, the pilot will land short. To adjust, the pilot references both the position and movement of the aim point along with airspeed. In light single-engine aircraft, the FAA recommends pitching for airspeed while using power to adjust descent rate. During the approach phase of the landing, there should be little difference from a normal landing. The soft field approach may be flown at a lower approach angle if obstacles are not present. In the Piper Warrior, final is flown at 70 knots with 40 degrees of flaps. When within about a quarter to an eighth of a mile from the runway, the pilot should transition to the appropriate approach speed as determined from the POH for a short field landing. The speed is often between 61 and 65 knots in the Warrior. The Airplane Flying Handbook notes that the final approach speed used for short field landings is equally appropriate for soft field landings. This is to reduce excessive float and poor touchdown control.